Hello and welcome to a brand new series by the Observer Research Foundation that will explore in detail the various facets of Russian foreign and domestic policies. As part of this, in the coming weeks, we'll be talking to some of Russia's leading experts to understand better the interests and motivations of Russian policymakers on issues that have wide ranging implications for international politics. To kick off this series, today we will be focusing on Russia's approach towards South Asia in general and on the Indo-Russia relationship in particular. To discuss this, we are joined by one of Russia's leading experts on the subject, Dr. Alexey Kupriyanov, who is a senior fellow at the Institute of World Economy and International Relations at the Russian Academy of Sciences. Alexey, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the discussion.
Thank you, Nivedita. Hi.
Hi. So, predictably, my first question is on the subject of Indo-Russia relations. So, I was talking about how we are aware of the basic facets of the Indo-Russia relationship, that we have a strong relationship which has seen a steady growth in the defense and the energy sectors, while the economic relationship leaves a lot to be desired. At the same time, we are aware of the emerging world order and its possible implications on the bilateral interactions. These issues have already been analyzed in quite a bit of detail over the years. So, knowing what we know, I want you to analyze for us the importance of the Indo-Russia relationship in the midst of the changes underway in the international order. Why, in your opinion, is it important for the two countries to continue to invest in their bilateral strategic partnership?
Okay, Nivedita, thanks for the question. So let's see what is happening in the world right now. The situation is rather unstable. After the end of the Cold War and the collapse of Soviet Union, it seemed that an era of US hegemony began, but this was an apparent maybe hegemony, reluctant hegemony. The hegemon's duties, in fact, include not only general leadership, but also the willingness to help and protect, and if necessary, to sacrifice its own interest for the common good. From my point of view, America was not ready for any of this, and in the end, the world of history well turned into just a continuation of history. And now we are facing another stage. This is the stage of the decline of the United States and the decline of the West in general. The advantage that the West gained as a result of its industrial revolution in the 19th century gradually faded away, and the era of the return of the old Asian empires began. And now we are on the verge of polycentric world. In fact, I do not like the word multipolar because it provides for a position between the poles, plus always opposes minus, the North Pole always opposes South. And in this polycentric world, everything will be determined by the relationship between the poles, the balance. And therefore, connections between them will be of particular importance, going beyond simple tactical considerations. Therefore, Russian-Indian ties, which have been good for many decades, are very important from my point of view, because they give us an anchor in the stormy sea of world politics. As an example, we can cite at least the current situation with the American-Chinese confrontation, because China is interested in Russia becoming its junior ally, and the United States wants India to become their junior ally. Well, do India and Russia need it? Not sure. In this situation, Russian-Indian traditional ties turn into a strong rope that allows us not to control the orbit China and the United States, respectively.
It's really interesting how you have framed the Indo-Russia relationship as being an anchor in the stormy seas. Because in one of your recent articles, you have written that India and Russia must strive to achieve what you call flexible neutrality in the midst of a rising US-China confrontation. And you also just now touched upon the same issue. But how do you think this might be achieved, given that India has moved considerably closer to the United States, cooperating most notably, say, on Quad, the Indo-Pacific, there are a lot of new bilateral interactions. And how do you think that affects Russian calculations in Asia, in its relations with India? And in general, how does Russia perceive these developments on the Indo-US front?
Well, Russia, of course, is unhappy because it sees India as its strategic partner and one of the true friends it has left after the collapse of the Soviet Union, plus as a key partners in Asia and in the world. When your friend gets closer to a country that is imposing sanctions on you, publicly accuses you of meddling in its elections, and portrays you as a main evil, who will be pleased? In addition, Russia is interested in a neutral India. If India gets too close to the United States, it could lead to a full-scale confrontation between India and China, in which India will play the role of, from Russian point of view, of course, will play the role of an American bulwark and will drag chestnuts out of the fire for Americans. And Russia absolutely does not like this. From the Russian point of view, the United States is interested in India primarily as a means of confronting the China. Just imagine that China and the United States managed to come to an agreement. Well, the G2 scenario became a reality. In this case, would the United States coaching India the way it is doing now? I do not think so. So from Moscow's point of view, it's the difference between the friendship between Russia and India and the United States and India is that Russian-Indian friendship is valuable in itself, while the American-Indian friendship is based on a temporary factor of the problem of both countries with China. So that's all.
Okay, now if we are talking about G2, I'll also have to ask you about the Russia-China relationship that has grown considerably in recent years, while the India-China relationship seems to be going in the opposite direction. So, how do you think that the Russia-China relationship is going to affect Moscow's dealings with India in particular, as well as its positioning in the broader region of South Asia?
Well, this is quite a difficult question, mainly because Russian-Chinese relations are often misunderstood. Because a lot of Indian experts told me that Russia is becoming a vassal state of China. This is absolutely not true because Russia was not a vassal of China and never will be. The formula for Russia-Chinese relations is never against, not always together. So Russia and China are countries that, thanks to America's policies, are in the same boat now. But Russia's policy in South Asia has nothing to do with Chinese policy at all. And it is completely separate and focused on India and not China because we consider South Asia to be Indian sphere of interest. Accordingly, when there are Indian-China clashes, we are very unhappy because two of our very important strategic partners are in conflict. And we are trying to do everything to extinguish this conflict by offering a platform for negotiations, maybe of mediations if it is needed.
We also saw when the recent Indo-China border clashes were taking place, the Russia-India-China meet also happened, but it did not end up with a communique of any kind, which is generally the tradition. So do you see any role for this plurilateral setting in advancing some sort of talks on the Indo-China front? Because neither India nor China seem to be accepting any sort of mediating role.
Well, the problem that, in fact, Indian-Chinese problems are going to be settled by bilateral way. Well, and maybe a format like India-Russia-China can serve just as just to soften the hearts, of India and China, and just to provide any platform for negotiations. So we understand that we cannot meddle into Chinese-Indian relations because they're just bilateral. It could be settled just in bilateral way.
Okay, so now I'll move from the eastern borders of India to the western one, where Pakistan and Afghanistan remain areas of concern for New Delhi. How would you classify Russian interest when it comes to Pakistan as well as Afghanistan? As in, how do you think that Russian policy on those two countries is expected to evolve? And what reaction do you think that will evince from the Indian policymakers?
Well, that's another difficult question. In fact, Russia is interested in expanding cooperation with Pakistan, but we believe that our main partner in South Asia is India. So this cooperation should not harm Indian interest. It's even possible that sometimes we are overly cautious. For example, the United States considers Pakistan to be its major non-NATO ally, and this doesn't cause protest from India and doesn't interfere with American-Indian rapprochement well. And we are still more attentive to the feelings of Indians. In Afghanistan, our interests are the same for maybe 24 years. We want the war to end there as soon as possible because the war destabilizes the region. It threatens our southern borders. While the war is going on, drugs are flowing into Russia. Extremists can get to us. Of course, we do not help the Taliban with the weapons and do not assign awards for the heads of American soldiers. It is something from the realm of fantasies. We are rather cautious in our contacts with Taliban. If the United States is negotiating with them, it could be strange if we did not try to somehow become a part of Afghan settlement, because the United States are overseas and we are here. And for us, the settlement is more important than for them. Our positions is that we are for peace in Afghanistan, and if it can only be ensured through the participation of Taliban as a government, and if the Taliban is supported by a significant number of population, then we do not mind. But let the Taliban guarantee that it will not try to turn Afghanistan into the Islamic State. But this position, well, we are not all happy with this position, but I think it's at least realistic.
And do you think that India has a role to play in this, in Russia's policy towards Afghanistan?
Well, I hope to think so. I hope that I know the Indian problems with Taliban, about Indian difficulty there, about Indian support of Afghan regime, but maybe India and Russia as a country that are strongly interested in Afghanistan settlement could be maybe guarantors for the settlement. But, well, I'm not a specialist in Afghanistan, you know. It's just my position, not Russians.
So I see that we have talked a lot about individual countries. So now if I could ask you to take a step back and look at the broader picture and give us a sense of Russia's overall policy towards South Asia, and how does it tie into the broader vision of Greater Eurasia? Does it form part of the Greater Eurasia vision for the Russian policymakers? And what would you say are its strengths and weaknesses?
Well, in fact, you asked me two questions at once about South Asia and Greater Eurasia. Well, I'll begin from South Asia because, well, our policy in South Asia, during the Soviet era, we were actively present in South Asia, seeing India as our key partner and helping it to strengthen its position in South Asia. But in the post-Soviet era, we simply didn't have the resources to strengthen there. We left there and we are now, I think, returning, but at the same principles. For us, India remains the main partner, the main pillar of security system there. We view the entire situation in South Asia through the prism of cooperation with India. We have neither the capacity nor the desire to change the situation. Compared to Russia-India partnership, the Russian-Bangladesh partnership, Russian-Nepalese, Russian-Maldivian ties look very small, very tiny. Perhaps this is our mistake. Perhaps if we had stronger positions there, local countries would pay more attention to our interests. Maybe we can fix this mistake. But this policy, in fact, has its strengths and weaknesses and some other extension of other. Because Russia simply does not have any special interests in South Asia other than selling weapons to those who want to buy them and supporting India as its strategic partner. Accordingly, you simply cannot hook Russia there. This is good for us, but at the same time, well, we can't actually affect events in South Asia. This is bad for us. And concerning Greater Eurasia, it's quite simple because Greater Eurasia is a strategy that implies that the entire space of Eurasia should be united economically with the help of infrastructure projects and peace over the entire vast space. And this is important detail because there will be no connectivity of all this space without peace. Russia needs this cohesion well in order to develop. It has achieved defense efficiency, so it believes that its weapons, its army protected from enemies firmly enough, and now it needs to tackle well economic progress. And for this, it needs infrastructure, the connectivity of the entire surrounding space. And since Russia cannot, it does not want to command and force someone to do something, it only makes peacekeeping efforts in Greater Eurasia. Where is it? It's expected, it comes, well, as in Syria. But where we are not expected, as in Kashmir or South China Sea, it doesn't come because we try to convince all the actors that they need to live peacefully. So this is our position.
Alexey, your answer ties into my next question, which is about the regional order. And I wanted to ask, what do you think the new regional order in South Asia will look like? And how do you think India and Russia will be placed in it?
Well, I think that the formation of regional order South Asia is still far from complete. Much will depend on the actions and positions of the major powers there, major local powers, primarily India and China. And I believe that India will undoubtedly remain the center of Indian Ocean region and the western part of Indo-Pacific. And Russia's participation in South Asia affairs depends on the development of relations in the whole world. I can quite imagine a situation where Russia decides that it needs to strengthen its presence in the Indian Ocean region, but for this it will need India's help. With regard to the, well, so I can just add, just repeat, well, that with regard to the formation of regional order South Asia, perhaps the solution lies in the rejection of the European approach to borders and to sovereignty over territory in general. It's my own position, but let me remind you that linear borders, linear boundaries appeared relatively recently and are now considered obligatory feature of the state. But who said that they will be considered this obligatory feature in the future? Perhaps well, we should pay attention to the traditional models of sovereignty in the region that existed in pre-European time, a mantle of sovereignty when one state could be a vassal or client state of two centers of power at once, and this was perceived as normal. Or, for example, take a model of a multi-level system of players, well, heterogeneous system in Indian Ocean that existed before the arrival of Europeans, and where polities did not conflict one another, let agree that the spheres of security and economic interests do not always coincide. And economic interests do not necessarily entail the growing interest in the areas of political security. In the Indian Ocean region, various polities have found a common language with each other for millennia. In fact, I think it is worth considering the experience and not absolutizing the current phenomenon of states fighting with each other for influence. I think that's a temporary phenomenon on the axis of history. Maybe we should look at the past and the future at the same time.
Alexey, I do have time for one last question. And I want to ask you about what do you think from the Russian standpoint should India be doing to get Russia more involved in this region? And what steps should Russia take to become a more involved player in South Asia?
Well, Nivedita, it's a very painful question for me because from Russian points of view, we are present in the Indian Ocean region to the extent required. I believe not, and that there is scope and need for expansion. First of all, we need to understand why we need a presence in the region. While this is not obvious, I think, but in the future, perhaps we will decide that the base in Indian Ocean, our presence in the Indian Ocean, will not interfere with us and will be ready to pay for its rent, supply. To do this, we will need India's support as a major player. So two things are key: understanding what we need to do there and Indian willingness to provide us with the maximum support in this matter. Now we do not have first, this. We do not understand why we should to broaden our accent there. It's a problem.
And any specific things that India should be doing to get Russia more involved?
Oh, maybe to show us any benefits of our involvement there, because now we simply do not see them. It's the main problem.
Okay. So on that note, we come to the end of our discussion today. Dr. Alexey Kupriyanov, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out from your schedule and discussing these issues with us. It was absolutely wonderful to hear your insights on issues that are of such critical importance to the foreign policies of both our countries. Thank you once again, and goodbye.
Thank you, Nivedita. It was a pleasure. Bye.